I could not be more delighted to kick off today's event hosted by KPMG's Network of Women. The energy in this room is electrifying. For those who don't know me, I'm Lisa Rawls, and I'm a leader in KPMG's Technology Risk Group based in the US. And I'm the proud co-leader of our Women of Risk community, along with Cindy Izzo. Our Women of Risk community, or WORC as we refer to our community, is the first virtual chapter of KPMG's Network of Women, or KNOW. Can you tell that we like acronyms? We certainly do. The overall mission of WORC is to support and connect women in the risk profession to foster personal and professional growth within a collaborative environment. It's important to note that this is a virtual community of professionals that are within KPMG and external. It's the first of many virtual communities we hope to establish. And while it's a community to support and connect women, it's not just for women. We need and we want the participation of men in the risk profession too. We officially launched this community in 2018 and have made tremendous progress since that time. To date, we've held more than 25 events around the world and have over 1,200 members both within KPMG and outside the firm. As you know, March is Women's History Month, and March 8th is International Women's History Day. And we thought, what a better way to celebrate these two events than by bringing together some amazing women in the risk profession. And hopefully you're watching this session in viewing parties around the globe with other amazing women and our allies. It's incredible how far we've moved the inclusion and diversity needle and how the risk profession has evolved over time. And it's even more exciting for what lies ahead. With that, let's turn to today's panel discussion and our esteemed panelist. The theme of our panel is Innovating, Changing, and Leading. Our event hosts have all of your panelists' bios to share with their participants. The collective experience of this panel is quite impressive, and I know you'll all leave today's session with tips on innovating, changing, and leading. So panelists, I'll ask each of you to introduce yourself, tell a little about some of the ways that you encourage innovation and forward thinking in your workplace. Michaela?
Thank you very much, Lisa, and thanks for having me today. My name is Michaela McMurrow. I am a partner at a law firm, Covington & Burling. I'm a partner in the cybersecurity and data privacy practice group. So I advise clients involving issues concerning cyber risk, data privacy, compliance, and other risk associated with technology and change. So my message here today, in part, is to embrace technology. This is something that's coming, it's something that's here, it's not going away, and to stay forward thinking with respect to the kinds of technology and the tools that are out there, and to make technology work for you. And that means in your personal life, in your professional life, finding ways to embrace technology so that it can help you be more productive and a better version of yourself, whatever that means.
That's great. That's great. I'm Jen Chimick. I'm a partner in the Short Hills, New Jersey office. I lead the regulatory and compliance sector for healthcare life sciences and state and local government. I'm a healthcare life sciences person by background. Spent the last 21 years in some aspect of healthcare and life sciences, whether it was on the industry side or in the advisory capacity. I think for us on the innovation, we are constantly making changes not only on the tools that we utilize, the training of the teams, the broader spectrum of whether it's anti-bribery and corruption, or some of those of you in the audience, we're doing opioid litigation right now, a lot of cutting edge things that you see in the news every day, but you don't necessarily know that you're going to get to work on them as well.
Awesome. Hi, Jeannie Diefendiefer. I worked for Verizon Communications for 28 years, and I retired from there in 2012. And today, my number one priority is to actually control my time. And with that, I sit on public company boards. I also advise startup CEOs to scale their business from being a startup to a larger company. As being a techie, like Michaela said, and I'm an engineer by training, one of the things I focus on with boards, because that's my current work, is to help them not only understand technology from a user's point of view, but also help them understand their responsibility as governance experts sitting on these company boards to make sure that they help their CEO and the management team to go into the next chapters.
Awesome. Well, thank you. I look forward to the discussion. So let's start off, Jeannie, with you and digging into some leadership. How has your leadership style evolved over the years? And do you have a defined aha moment in your career that changed your leadership style significantly?
So, I was, when I look back at my career, it's always sort of interesting when you get to my age and you look sort of yonder on 28 years of learning, is that I'm not sure that I had a single aha moment. I suspect I had many mini aha moments. And I have to say, for me, the best learnings about leadership was people underneath me. And part of it is just having enough trust with your employees where you let them know your vulnerability. And for one reason or another, I'm sure being a woman helped, right? Because I didn't have a huge, I don't think, chip on my shoulder. So I was open to feedback. And I was a young, fearless, driven, my way or the highway. I had tons of different names from my people over my career. And I was just driven to drive results. And that was my reputation. If something was broken, send Jeannie in to fix it. If somebody needed to be disciplined, send Jeannie in to take care of that problem. I just never had issue facing those tough issues. But one thing I learned, and having kids and getting older helps, because I remember my two little kids, whenever we got into a debate at home, they were very little, and I go into this, sort of a tirade of a leadership thing. It was like, let's gather the facts, analyze the problem, what's the outcome we're trying to drive, and we're gonna assign actions, and we're gonna get. And I remember my two kids used to look at me and go, "We don't work for you." Like, hello, And it's a learning, right? As a mom, it's like, oh yeah, that's my other brain, and. So I would say the changes in style was probably, and aging helps too, listening more, reading the audience more when you're so driven, when you're sort of looking at your outcome rather than sort of taking in what's coming at you, and being more relaxed about taking time to get feedback, get input, getting everybody to sort of fulfill their potential, not the way I define it all the time, but also the way every individual defines it. I think I've gotten to a point where I got comfortable being imperfect. You're never uncomfortable being imperfect, but you know what I mean. So you get better, try to get better at it over the years. And also giving people space to make mistakes and learn from it. I used to really have a high bar for myself, and when you do that, you usually translate to others. And to learn that not everybody's like me, and that there are different ways to get to the same outcome. So I would say those are some of the learnings I've had.
Awesome. Michaela, any leadership style changes from your experience? I know.
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I didn't mention this in the introduction, but part of my background is as an Army officer. So I'm a graduate of West Point, and I spent my first 6 years in the professional world as a military intelligence officer. And I was, in my early 20s, I was a platoon leader of, a 60-person platoon doing intelligence analysis in Europe and the former Soviet Union. And so I have a different perspective on leadership. My formative years as a leader were spent not in the legal field, but in a field where the stakes were very different and the outcomes were very different and the responsibilities were very different. And so a little bit like Jeannie, I feel like I grew up in a world where there was a very high price for making a mistake, and I really had a high bar for myself and others. And making the transition onto the civilian side has been really interesting for me, because in the military it's such a hierarchical culture, right? And there's a lot of authority, and somebody, if you give somebody a lawful order, as long as it's a lawful order, they kind of have to follow it, right? There's no such analog in the civilian sector. So, things like influencing, persuading, become more important in a leadership capacity, right? Because people don't necessarily have to follow you just because you say things. I mean, on a certain extent, it's very instrumental. And if they want to do well and get a good performance evaluation, they will. But the reality is that the carrots and sticks are different, but the outcomes are also different, right? So there's perhaps there's less room for error in some ways in the military. And in the civilian world can afford to be a little bit more failure tolerant, and that is a good thing for innovation, right? So if you can try different things and possibly not get things right the first time, but iterate quickly, make adjustments, and move on, that's very important. So I think that my leadership style has been informed by my experience on both sides of the line. And I think that now I'm at a place where I bring them together, right? And I kind of borrow from different places. So it's the same way that Jeannie was talking about, different parts of my brain and my leadership style have to be drawn upon in different circumstances.
Yeah, to really read the audience to make sure you're drawing upon the right ones.
Reading the audience, getting feedback, getting input, those are all critical things that play out in different ways. Yeah.
Yep. Anything else to add?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, mine's probably maybe a little bit different because I grew up in the Big Four, right? So I think growing up in the Big Four, you see everybody at every different level. You've experienced all of those different positions. I grew up at a time where being a partner was, I think, a little bit more intimidating for folks. And I looked at those partners and I thought, I do not want to be that. I want to be team-oriented. I want to be kind. I want to be seen as somebody who's warm and take anyone to pull in and train as long as you have a willingness to do it. So I think I'm seen more as like the cheerleader kind, the warm with the arms open and, trying to be an acceptor of anyone to be on that team. And I think I'm a big sports person, not the best athlete on the planet, but I think I always kind of make those references of wanting to be part of that football team and wanting everyone to want to be part of the group. So I think mine is a little bit different.
It's an important lesson, though, that people are motivated in different ways,
Yeah.
right? And so different leadership styles work differently in different circumstances, and they can all be successful. You just have to adapt them to whatever the challenge is or whatever the task at hand is. But some people are more motivated by come along with me, the handshake, the pat on the back. Others are more motivated by the if I don't get this done, this is going to happen. And you just kind of, as a leader, have to figure out what's going to work in these circumstances for this team and this task.
What's their motivation?
What's their motivation? What's my task?
Yep, exactly. So that you all can be successful.
That's right.
Ultimately. So this year, many organizations participated in the Day of Understanding. CEOs were sponsoring this. We did this here at KPMG, and it was a wonderful opportunity for me in my hometown in the DC area to really have a greater appreciation of making sure I take a step back and understand where folks are coming from, really building more that empathy muscle, I'll call it. So Jeannie, a question for you. Do you believe that women have to take a different approach to leadership styles to take into account some of those blind prejudice and things that people are going to assume?
Yeah, and that too evolved for me because being a young person, I was naive in the beginning to come into a workplace and say, well, I mean, everybody should be clear about my intentions, right? I mean, I kind of bleed, sort of out. There's no hidden agenda here. But what I learned is that everybody takes that according to their own filters. And one thing I realized, particularly being a woman leader, and I'm sure you two experienced this as well, and when I had mostly men work for me my entire career, right? And I realized, and reading the audience comes into effect, because when you start to read the audience, and I realized that I was very open. My style's informal, as you can probably figure out, and I smile a lot, which I need to do because I get so intense otherwise. I could really scare people, so it's a learned behavior, and I ask for feedback and input, right? And what I realized is that as a woman who's the boss, my direct reports who were men sometimes took that as a weakness because they were used to being told what to do. And a large utility telecommunications company tends to be hierarchical, right? There's a huge division of labor going on there. And I picked it up, and I decided that I needed to sort of kind of face it head on. And one of my staff meetings, I basically told my team that there seems to be sometimes the perception that because I tend to ask for feedback and input, and I listen to a lot of ideas around the table, that you guys may be thinking that I'm too afraid to make a decision. So I just decided to announce that I'm not. And I just said, you know, with a smile, I said, so I am very clear that I hold 51% of the vote. And I like getting input, but I will make the decision. And I'm not shy about it. And you will all line up once I make the decision, because we're a team. And we can disagree, but it's very important that we talk through the differences so that we can, when we leave this room, that we behave like a single leader. And one thing I learned, thank God, I don't know where it came from, is I just was always clear. Clarity for me was really important in communicating with others about my intentions and also my rationale, because I felt it helped everybody understand, even if they disagree, as to the whys of my thinking process. So I think that helped me over the years. Now I look back, I think it helped me over the years to get stuff done.
And I think transparency is so key.
Yeah.
So I work for a gentleman now, or report up through a gentleman now, and he's so transparent about everything. And I admire that in him, because it's one of those where it's like, wow, he just said it like it is. And I think it kind of makes you say, okay, well, then I'm going to be transparent with you guys and say, this is what's going on,
So
right?
it's learning.
So nobody's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
They know what's happening. They know at least as much as they can be told. And I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah.
I think the other message too is authenticity and bringing your authentic self to leadership, because I think the people that we work with are smart. And you know, the people that I worked with in the military were smart, and they can figure out very quickly if a leader is not being authentic. And so whatever that means for you, whether it's a male-female thing or a leadership style thing, the important part is bringing who you are authentically in your style to the task, so that you're not trying to be somebody you're not because you think the situation calls for it. You're figuring out how your authentic self can best get the mission done. And tweaking it over time.
And having the authentic conversation
That's
too.
right.
So that then others
Which is
are bringing that.
not easy, right? Not that easy
And,
always.
You know, really why you bring that perspective.
Absolutely.
Understanding that my background, you know, you're in the military, so you actually understand and bring a different perspective and share that.
That's right.
You know, I often tell my daughter and other mentees that I have, if there's one thing I want people to sort of develop the muscle for, is the ability to be perceptive 360 degrees. And that means paying attention, right? And you tell me how often you go into a meeting and you listen to somebody speak, and they're so oblivious to what's going on, because they're so focused internally on that one or two or three things they have to say, right? So they kind of close down all their pores, when they miss the opportunity to really take it all in terms of what's being heard, people's body movements, right? You can read a lot. And so I always say, just observe the environment, because that's part of reading the audience, right? Because if you care about your objective in getting whatever that you want to get thing done, it's very important that you sort of observe it and see how people take that in and what are their inputs to that.
Take a breath.
Exactly, right? Yeah,
take a moment,
listen, take it in. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Because you're probably able to make some other connections
Yes.
that may allow you to get your point across. But if all
think
you're
so.
focused on is what you're trying to prove,
Yeah, yeah, it's tough.
very tough, very tough. Well, moving to some innovation and change, Michaela, a question for you. What are some of the significant changes you foresee happening in the risk industry over the next 5 to 10 years?
It's a great question, and I think it goes back to sort of my core premise here about technology. And you know, the conversation nowadays is really about two things: the Internet of Things and artificial intelligence, and how those two things work together, right? Depending on the source of information you're looking at, there's going to be billions of IoT devices that are out there in a year or 18 months or something like that. And then you think of all the data that those devices are creating. So those are at the edge, if you will. They're collecting, they're the sensors. And then all of that information is coming back to the platform, the artificial intelligence. So this is the algorithm, right, that's taking in all the data, churning it, and making predictions. And making predictions about how things are going to turn out, making predictions about how people are going to behave, making predictions about how a system is going to work. and trying to, in certain ways, predict what the user needs or wants in a given situation, whether that's me on my phone seeing ads that pop up for me, or whether that is a larger corporate system that is taking in data to predict corporate risk. So what we see is we see both the proliferation of data along with the development and the increased advancement of the artificial intelligence and the prediction and the modeling that's being done on the AI side. So it's really an interesting time right now, because we overlay that entire scheme with the increased focus on privacy. So at the same time that you have sensors collecting all of this, and sensors cropping up everywhere, publicly, privately, in people's homes, you have an increased focus on where that data is going, what permissions you need, what you can do with it, what somebody else can do with it, and information about what a company can do with its data, what a company can do with its customers' data. So it's really an interesting time. And so I think over the next 5 years, let's say, I think AI is going to be a big part of the conversation. And I think with respect to risk and enterprise risk, there will be some interesting developments with respect to how machine learning is predicting risk, and what kinds of things machine learning can look out for, what kinds of connections the machine can make to predict certain situations, predict risk, reduce risk, say this is what I think is going to happen, so you can take steps to mitigate risk in advance. So that's where I see things going.
We're seeing that too, even in healthcare. So they're even starting to do studies at MIT where if you place some of these devices within these patients' homes or on their bodies, and could they collect all of that data so that the patient doesn't necessarily have to come into the doctor, right? Can you be tracking all of this where it's coming into some sort of system, within the hospital or within the physician practice, so that they can truly be monitoring these patients on a live day-by-day basis versus the necessity of actually having to present into some sort of office setting.
And the precision with some of the AI. I mean, they can, do surgeries. I think that there was an instance recently where there was the machine made a slip up, and there was an issue. So I wonder if that's going to, cause anything to
slow it down.
Because there is a risk with this new,
It's really interesting because the AI itself is still, written by humans, right? The algorithms are still, at least today, mostly, right? But there's still a human element to it in terms of building the model and the data sets that are fed into it. And this is an issue that we see, is that the AI and the prediction is only as good as the model and the data that trains it. And so you really have to focus, when you're developing these systems in any context, on the quality of the data that is training the system.
Right, and then who's going to be checking it? Because if it's trained to do something wrong,
You have to make
it's going to get,
adjustments.
it could get
And
worse.
most likely, with all those potential risks, it's still probably less than humans, right?
That's
so
true.
that's the
error.
fear factor that humans have, because we want that perfect machine to.
Even though we're not perfect.
Right.
Exactly, we're even less perfect, right? So that's the whole point. So it's amazing to me that how that fear kind of plays into it, and part of it is also being fearful of what you don't know, right? So those of us who may not be 100% technical, I always say, it's knowledge is a verb, right? For me, so and confidence goes along with it. It's not a destination; it's a process, and it's making sure that you roll up your sleeves and you learn, because honestly, we all have the capacity to learn it.
My final question for you all, and thank you so much for your time today, is what are you doing to ensure you continue to grow and develop as a leader and meet the demands that result from the disruptive changes that we talked about coming towards us in the workplace?
So for me, I think there are 3 things I need to think about. I need to think about the work that I'm doing every day. So what needs to get done today just to be like baseline competent at my job. Then there's what's the longer term, i.e. what needs to happen this month, what needs to happen next month, what are the projects that are on the horizon, how do I need to lean forward on those? But then the final thing is what's around the corner. And I think that as a leader, you have to be thinking that. Even when you don't feel like you have time to do that, you have to pick your head up and say, what's around the corner? What am I not thinking of right now that's coming, that I need to start thinking about right now? What are the things that I can plan for right now? What are the things that I can do in my organization to set ourselves up for success for the things that are way ahead way down the line. And whatever way ahead means can be dependent on your job, right? I think, the more senior you are in a company, the longer term that is, right? But really, I think that thinking about your work on those 3 levels. And I think as you get more senior, the last one becomes more important, right? Early on in your career, the important thing is to do your job correctly and competently. And other people maybe are doing strategy, right? But I think as you become more senior in an organization, it becomes more important to pick your head up and look around and see what's coming down the road. What are the obstacles right now that other people aren't thinking about that I can look ahead and think about?
I think for me, I think we're really fortunate at KPMG. We have a lot of training opportunities and a lot of opportunities to mentor with more senior partners who have been there and done that and have navigated the different career pathways. I think for me, I try to take as much advantage of that as possible. I really try to take those mentoring sessions and learn from them. They've taught me to self-reflect, where you take a moment to see where you kind of are, live in the moment a little bit. I mean, you don't want to be so far forward thinking that I'm not thinking about today either. But then, I know Kelly Watson has said it a million times, right? Reach up to somebody who's going to pull you through, but at the same time, you've got to pull someone else. And I think that's critical for all of us to do. I mean, there's somebody behind us that needs it as much as we needed it. So I think that's really important for me.
This chain of lovely ladies coming up.
Right. That's right.
That's
I think it's important.
Which is awesome.
Yes.
And Kelly and I often say, I look at my career, and it's just amazing what's available today for, frankly, anybody who wants to develop themselves and learn from others, but also for so many women. The environment is so much richer in terms of finding other women as mentors, and I mean, things like this, it just makes my heart sing, and it's fantastic. So as somebody who's not on payroll, what I try to do is my mission right now is to really take creating excellence at the board level, sort of my thing. And I care deeply about governance. And I want to make sure that the board work that I do is making sure that we take responsibility. Oftentimes, board is considered a point of sort of the pinnacle of success and destination, rather than the way I like to see it as a point of arrival. So much work to me needs to be done around making sure that different voices are inside the boardroom. Diversity and inclusion in the boardroom is something that we all need to continue to work on as board members. I take that personally as I chair the NomGov committee for one of my companies that I sit on. So it's my mission to do that. I keep up with, I'm a techie by training and by love, so I keep up with all the technical stuff that goes on around the world because I just love that. And then really living by what Kelly said, right? Which is making yourself sort of move forward, but also taking somebody with you. And not only talking about it, which is easy, but also doing something about it, which is harder. But I get so much joy out of doing these things, and it's a real pleasure.
Awesome. Well, thank you all for being here today. We greatly appreciate it. I hope you all learned amazing tips around innovating, changing, and leading. And we look forward to seeing you all at future Women of Risk community events.
Thank you.
Wonderful.